Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Kathy Groover.
And I'm Jason Mefford. And today we're going to do another little question episode where we just pose a question and we start talking. And so today we want to talk about what literary character you would be, right? So obviously behind me, I've got lots of books. I love reading. Kathy does too. She kind of has her little screen there because of her office situation. But so literary character, right? Because there's a lot of very interesting characters in literature. So Kathy, what literary character would you be and why?
I would be Morgan Le Fay from Mists of Avalon. Because
Really?
Yes, I was obsessed with that book throughout college. I must have read it 20 or 30 times. And the way that mythic, we still aren't sure if these people actually existed, right? This mythic character was portrayed in Mists of Avalon, gave the power to the women. Whereas in so many other books on Arthurian legend, it's all about the men and the women are sort of secondary thoughts. Morgan Le Fay was this like powerful, kick-ass magic. You know, she kind of held it together. It's been so long since I've read the book. I'll have to go revisit it. But I was just obsessed with her character. And she had flaws, right? She fell in love, and that was sort of the downfall of everything. So, I'm going with Morgan Le Fay.
So don't fall in love and be a strong woman.
Damn it. It already happened.
Oh, man.
But it wasn't my downfall. It wasn't my downfall.
No, which is another episode coming up, right?
Yeah.
But no, I think it's interesting, you raise a good point there that I think in history or a lot of the things that are portrayed, it's usually been written by men. And we've had a very masculine dominated culture for hundreds of years now, that a lot of times women are kind of forgotten from history because they weren't really written in. But the reality is, right, it's like behind, there's sayings like behind every good man is a great woman or something like that, right? And it's always true, right? It's like any time that, and a lot of times there's even examples of where it was really the woman kind of pulling the strings, but the man just happened to be the one who was in the forefront, right? Because that's what was acceptable in culture. I mean, we've even got examples of, I can't remember any specific examples, but there were a lot of women authors who would use male pen names, or would only use initials, right? At the beginning, and instead of putting their name, it'd be like H.G. Smith, right? So that nobody knew it was Helen Smith who was actually writing the book. And oh my gosh, we can't read a book from a woman, right? Which is kind of sad. And it's nice now to see more of kind of that feminine energy coming out more.
Exactly. And to that point, if you read a lot of the Arthurian legends, excuse me, Morgan is portrayed as this like evil witch, right? This evil person. And it's Arthur and Guinevere's this being a perfect, petite, very feminine kind of character. And in Mists of Avalon, Morgan Le Fay is like the heroine, and Guinevere is portrayed as this just stupid twit who screws everything up. So, it kind of reverses these roles of what is considered appropriate feminine, right? So if you were powerful and, your own person, you were this evil witch. But if you were this demure kind of like loving, then that was okay. And what I love about Mists of Avalon is it flips that and makes Guinevere the idiot. And, Morgan Le Fay becomes the heroine of this to a certain extent.
Well, and it's funny, there's little things like that in history that have always kind of downplayed the strong women.
Yeah.
Like you said, right? If a woman was strong, then she was, a witch. You're a witch. We got to burn you at the stake, or whatever. where if that same kind of thing was portrayed from a man, it was viewed as being strong and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting how, like you said, history has been written to downplay women, which is unfortunate.
Yep.
Even to the point of in religious texts and things like that, referring to women as virgins. It's like, hello. Right? It's like, I think most of those people probably weren't virgins, but we're gonna call them a saint and we're gonna label them as a virgin instead, when that's not necessarily what they were. So
exactly.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So that was mine. I actually went to I had once had a come as your favorite fictional character party.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone came as their favorite fictional character. And my hope was, and from the acting background, this was my hope, not everyone played along, that they had to interact with all the other fictional characters as their fictional character.
Oh, wow.
So
it's like a little acting and party together, huh?
So Morgan Le Fay's talking to Superman, and then Aunt F.A. and the uncle from Clue came in, or from Monopoly came in, and my friend came as Captain Spatula, which was a made-up superhero that he had invented. And we had all these people interacting as these different characters. It was so much fun. And I was Morgan Le Fay.
Well, that's a little way of kind of doing alter ego kind of stuff. And we've talked about ego states before.
Yeah.
Too, where I think that's one example of trying to become who you want to really be and being the person you want to be. One of the tricks a lot of times is to act like that alter ego.
Yep.
Right. Embody that person, act like they would act, which is little learning tip for everybody too. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, Jason, what's your latest character?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't have like a strong specific character. So I'll just throw one out there that kind of popped into my head, which is kind of funny. But I like some kind of non-traditional authors, and one of them is Charles Bukowski. And I don't know if you know who he is, but he was known for writing some kind of salacious material. Okay. In fact, he couldn't get published to begin with. So most of the stuff that he would do from a poetry standpoint or short stories were actually picked up by like underground porn mags and things like that, because that was the only people who would publish him.
Right. Wow.
But he had a really interesting life, because he worked at the post office for like most of his life. He was an alcoholic, typical like artist kind of person, right? And finally was able to hold down a job with the post office, and kind of retired from the post office at about 50. And that was when he actually started being commercially successful. So what's funny is the end of one of his first books, I think it's called Post Office, if I remember right, it's this whole story about this guy working at the post office, and then at the end he leaves the post office and writes a book. And so it's kind of like one of these autobiographical things.
Yeah.
But which is kind of interesting. But it was he in real life, Charles was just himself, right? He was a drunk. He was a dirty old man. I mean, in fact, a lot of the like short stories and poetry things were under the kind of the brand of Diary of a Dirty Old Man, right? And so, but I love that he was unashamedly himself. And so he created a character called Hank Chionsky, which is kind of a go off of his name, right? But this character, showed up in many of the different books. And so it's kind of an autobiographical thing of him. And so again, it's like, it's not that I want to be a drunk and a dirty old man, but maybe I am a dirty old man. I'm not a drunk. But
yes.
Yeah. Right. but I love how, like I said, he was just who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it didn't fit the conventional norms, you know, uh it was funny. And actually it kind of reminds me, I was moved recently, so I was checking out some new places and went into like this little dive bar last night,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like the locals only, just to see. And they had a whole wall of bumper stickers,
Oh,
which is kind of, kind of interesting. So you're sitting there having a beer and just reading things, and
yeah.
one of them was like, what was it? Uh, Fetish is using a feather. Perversion is using the whole
Whole
chicken.
chicken.
So, anyway, that just kind of reminded me too. But it's interesting, like that. People might look at how Bukowski lived his life or this character,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's easy to judge and say, "Oh, you're a pervert, you're weird," and it's like, no, he was just being who he was, and he was a
Yeah.
sexually active person who drank a lot, who womanized, but that was who he was. And he didn't try to hide it. He didn't
Mm.
try to fit into culture. He was just who he was. And a lot of people didn't like him, but a lot of people love him
Yeah.
too. Right. It's kind of like he kind of has a little cult following.
Hmm.
He died many years ago. But yeah, there's still kind of a cult
Interesting.
following for his stuff. So,
So it sounds like this idea of being unapologetically you, right? Just
mhm,
being your authentic self,
mhm.
which is what literature should, you know, uh, people write things to affect change, to spark feelings or thoughts in the people that are reading their material. And so if this man with his following, even though as quote flawed an individual as he was able to bring up those feelings in people of just being unapologetically you, even with those ugly parts, that's pretty powerful.
No, it is, and I think that's where, like I said, because as a person, as an artist, I've got a lot of respect for him because of that. Because most people would and do give in to kind of the commercial stuff,
Yep.
right? They write something that's going to be commercially successful instead of what they really want to do.
Right.
And so, again, that's just kind of a lesson for all of us, is are we giving in to the man, or are we living our life authentically?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, and that reminded me, when you kind of step out of what your genre is, right? So Judy Blume was one of the most popular children's writers.
Yep.
Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Crazy Lay. I mean, she wrote all these incredible kids' books. She wrote adult novels.
I didn't know that. Did she do them under her name, or?
Dirty adult novels. Yeah. Wifey was one of my favorite books growing up, because I saw it was Judy Blume and I was like, oh my God, but it was clearly not for little kids. And so I started reading it, and there's some hot sections in that. And no one knows that she wrote these books, even though it's under her name.
Huh,
But I swear to God, this was like my lay by the pool every summer and read the book.
yeah.
I read this thing till the cover fell off. I still have it someplace, because at this point I'm like, there's no possible way I can get rid of this completely tattered paperback book. I must have read the thing 50 times, because it was such an easy read. And I knew it so well, I could just, and I'd be done with it like in 3 days. And it was
Huh.
just fun. But, people didn't acknowledge her for that. Anne Rice, who wrote all the vampire books, right? She wrote under a different name. She wrote this really adult, like erotic stuff, but she was so worried that using her real name would, you know,
Yeah.
sully the rest of her books. So she wrote all these books like the Cinderella tales or something, but it's all porn. So people are finding ways. So mainstream authors are finding ways to express themselves in different ways. But yeah, check out Wifey. I think you'd actually like Wifey. It's definitely written more from like a woman's perspective.
It's all right.
But it's a really good book.
Huh. Yeah, so again, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, where we kind of went with just asking this question, but about, hey, stronger female characters, and I think one thing too, is what's funny is like the two that you mentioned were actually female, right? Where again, it's like a female to write salacious material. Oh my gosh, she's a slut. And it's
especially
like,
back then, because this is from, I don't know when she wrote Wife. I mean, it must have been late 70s, early 80s, because that's when I was reading it.
okay. Yeah, where again, a lot of people would judge, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with being sexually active, and we should be sexually active. And if you have fetishes, hey, go for it, right? I mean, we talked about that before on here with the dominatrix, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's there's nothing wrong with it. Just, be who you are and step into it, because one of my favorite quotes is from Oscar Wilde, be yourself, everybody else is taken, and when you and his life was an example of that too, right? I mean, a gay man in the 1800s and a drunk and drug addict and everything else. I mean, but he was who he was, and he ended up going to jail and dying in jail for refusing to give into or be someone else. He was going to be himself, even though it was against the law, and he got himself into a lot of trouble. So
and through literature we get to be somebody else. Every time I pick up Mists of Avalon, I get to be Morgan Le Fay and get sucked into a completely different realm in a different world. It's exciting.
Well, and hopefully, again, as we do that and we spend time, if you will, with these characters, it will give all of us the courage to be more like that character, if that's who you want to be, right? Because what's interesting too is as an author myself, right? It's like everything that somebody writes is autobiographical in one way or another. And so even though we're reading fiction, it's not really fiction.
Right.
Right. And so we can learn from it. We can gain courage from it. We can be different and get inspired to live our life in a different way. So
totally cool. I love these little conversations. All right.
There we go.
I am Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, grab a good book, read it this week, and catch us on the next episode of Fire and Earth Podcast. See you later.
See ya.